Welcome to the Yoga Hour, offering insights and practices for spiritually conscious living in today's world. Here is your host, Dr. Laurel Trujillo.
Welcome to the Yoga Hour, where we talk about yoga in all its depth and breadth as a path to spiritually conscious, fulfilled living in today's world. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo, host and producer of the show. Our topic today is a meditator's guide to Advent. What inner meaning is there in this season of Advent that can bring richness to our yoga and meditation practice? So I'll be discussing that with the founder and spiritual director of the Yoga Hour, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brian. Yogacharya O'Brian was ordained to teach in the Kriya Yoga tradition in 1982 by her guru, Roy Eugene Davis, who was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. Yogacharya O'Brian is an internationally acclaimed spiritual teacher, author, poet, and she founded and is the spiritual director also for the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, a Kriya Yoga meditation center with headquarters in San Jose, California. Yogacharya O'Brian has published several books, including Living the Eternal Way and The Jewel of Abundance, as well as several books of poetry, including the award-winning The Moon Reminded Me. Her newest ebook that we will be discussing today is Path of Wonder, a Meditator's Guide to Advent. Her online classes include Arta 365, Dharma 365, and Live the Eternal Way. You can find out more about all of her books and online programs at her website, ellengraceobrian.com, and O'Brian, the Brian is with an A, BRIAN.com, and csecenter.org. You can also follow her on social media, on Facebook at Ellen Grace O'Brian, and on Twitter at Yogacharya Live. Welcome, Yogacharya O'Brian. I'm really delighted to have you join me today on the Yoga Hour.
Thank you so much, Dr. Trujillo, and greetings to all the Yoga Hour listeners and subscribers. I'm so happy to be with you.
So before we dive into our conversation about the deeper meaning of Advent, let's dive into a yoga moment, a moment that we fill with present awareness. So let's begin just by feeling our bodies in space. Whatever you're doing, feeling all of the surfaces that support you. Taking that moment just to feel the ground beneath our feet. And then turning our attention to the breath, let's just notice on our next inhale and exhale. The next inhale, feeling the cool air in the nostrils. And the next exhale, feel the warm air flowing out. Letting go of anything that may have happened earlier today. Letting go of any anticipation of what may happen later. Let's just be here right now. And as we rest here, right where we are, here's something to contemplate, taken from Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Man's Eternal Quest. And here he's talking about Jesus Christ as Christ consciousness, which we'll be discussing more later on in the program. Will Jesus come again? Metaphysically, he is already omnipresent. He smiles at you through every flower. He feels his cosmic body in every speck of space. Every movement of the wind breathes the breath of Jesus. Through his oneness with the divine Christ consciousness, he is incarnate in all that lives. If you have eyes to behold, you can see him enthroned throughout creation. If you have eyes to behold, you can see him enthroned throughout creation. So once again, Yogacharya O'Brian, I'm really delighted to have you join me today on the Yoga Hour. And I've been looking forward to our conversation about the deeper symbolism of Advent from the perspective of yoga philosophy, because I know that this was one thing that was very important to Yogananda in his teaching. He really tried to build bridges between East and West, and particularly between Christianity and yoga. So, starting there, why do you think that that was so important to him? Why do you think Yogananda emphasized building these bridges between yoga and Christianity in his teachings?
Thank you for that wonderful meditation. First, that was a lovely way to begin. I think there are several reasons why Yogananda offered many teachings about the harmony between East and West when we move to the mystical experience of these teachings. First and foremost, it was the mission given to him by the gurus of Kriya Yoga from Mahavatar Babaji to show this harmony between the spiritual teachings of the East and the West, to break down sectarian barriers that lead to wars and all sorts of unrest in the world, and to bring a cosmic awareness of what the reality of God is. So Babaji gave the directive to Yogananda's guru, Sri Yukteswar, to write the Holy Science, which he did to show the harmony between the scriptures of the East and the West. And so Yogananda was really carrying on the work of his lineage, of his tradition. And, I'm doing the same with what I have been doing, these many decades, and which my guru, Roy Eugene Davis, did as well. So there was that directive to contribute to global harmony by showing at the depth, how there is really one reality that they're all pointing to. So there was that. And I think Yogananda's own deep mystical experiences had him share, from that depth of what he knew about the Christ, about Christ consciousness, being that reality which is found in all traditions. So he was sharing from his own direct experience. And all of this points to the goal of Kriya Yoga, which is self and God realization, recognizing, the Christ in you, as the Christian scriptures say, the hope of glory. So that was really the mission of Kriya Yogis as well, to awaken to the omnipresent Christ, the omnipresent Krishna, the Lord of love that dwells within our own hearts.
So we have this new ebook from you that was released just a few weeks ago, I think. So why did you write Path of Wonder, A Meditator's Guide to Advent at this particular time? What was your inspiration? I mean, you've already sort of talked about it, but is there anything else?
Well, it's a work that I have been doing for actually many decades. I've given several retreats on the theme of Advent. And that began, as I mentioned, as a carrying on of the work of the gurus in my tradition, making the teachings of the West, in a sense, metaphysically accessible to yoga students. One of the things I've noticed, it's not always the case, but often I find it fascinating that in the West, where has been largely a Christian foundation for people who come to yoga teachings. That's changing now, because in the West, the communities are becoming more pluralistic. But certainly when Yogananda came here to the United States, there was largely a Christian base that he was speaking to. And still there's a prevalence of Christianity in our culture. So I find that often people who come to yoga either have had some negative experience or disappointment or lack of fulfillment with Christianity. So they turn to the East, to the teachings of yoga, to look for God, to look for that experience of reality. And they want to leave, all of that behind. And, because yoga arises out of the Vedas and Hinduism, we have these symbols of Shiva, Krishna, Lord Ganesh, Divine Mother as Saraswati, Lakshmi, all of this. And I find that for the most part, yoga students are very willing to look at that, and to what do these symbols represent, and how can that help my practice? And because there's a beginner's mind, that they're coming to. And so there's this openness and receptivity. And again, not always. I can't really generalize because some people, are afraid to look at those symbols. But there's not the same in terms of the students that I've worked with. There's often not the same willingness to dive into the symbols that are present in the Christian tradition. There's not the same beginner's mind. People have some baggage that they're bringing. So I have long had this mission to redeem that doorway into the infinite, because the Christian symbols are powerful. Of course, they're very powerful. And the teachings are powerful. And so I have done this work to help those who have left or who have no connection or who are new to the Christian tradition to be able to approach it with the same, ideally, beginner's mind. And the third reason about Path of Wonder at this time is that, this is the time of the global pandemic. And, people really need a stronger spiritual ground at this time. I was thinking about it this morning. We feel we have no place to go. There's no place in the world that you can go that is safe from the pandemic right now.
Yeah.
So, and people are on lockdown. We're in that second wave of it. And so where do we go, to find safety, to find solace, to find healing, to find strength? Well, we go within. And the season of Advent gives us very inspired tools and meditations, for going in the time of darkness, in the time of mystery, to find the hope that we need, the light that we need. So the timing is really perfect for us to be doing this work.
Indeed. And I've really, really appreciated that you've created this wonderful resource for us. It's available. So in the contemplation reading that I did from Yogananda, he was talking about Christ consciousness. So from a yoga perspective, can you talk more about that? What is Christ consciousness, or is it Kutastha Chaitanya? Is that right?
Chaitanya, yeah.
Chaitanya.
Kutastha Chaitanya. That is really the inner self, the divine self, that is God expressing within, as the highest consciousness, the unchanging. Kutastha is the summit, the highest consciousness. And this Kutastha Chaitanya in the practices of yoga is associated with the third eye, that entry point to the Christ conscious awareness, that higher experience of the divine reality as our own essence. So this Kutastha consciousness is Christ consciousness, is Krishna consciousness, is Buddha consciousness, the inner consciousness of the inner self. And it is an unchanging state of consciousness, that is beyond all manifestation, beyond all attachment.
Beautiful. So in your ebook, you quote Paramahansa Yogananda, who wrote, "It is of utmost importance to all people, whatever their religion, that they experience within themselves the birth of the universal Christ." So this is what Advent is about. We're heading for Christmas Day, the birth of Christ. And looking at it from this larger perspective of this birth of our own awareness of our Christ consciousness, how can we encourage that? How can we encourage that birth?
Well, in Yogananda's work, of course, he was encouraging us, which he did with his writings, and then his bringing forth of a spiritual meditation, before Christmas. He would have an extended time of meditation for people to meditate on Christ consciousness and on Lord Jesus and the teachings that he brought, to move, out of the material, solely material celebration and at the literal level, like celebrating the birthday of Jesus and missing the message that he brought, which was to awaken to the Christ, the realization of Emmanuel, God with us, God within us. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but
yeah. No, I think that's, well, you pointed to meditation, which, as we know, is such an important part, of this, well, of all of our spiritual practice, of our sadhana. So another quote from Paramahansa Yogananda, he wrote, "To bring divine awareness into our human consciousness, we must outgrow the limited conventional concept of Christ," which is really what we're talking about here. So again, any tips on how we can outgrow that limited conventional, concept of Christ, and maybe particularly for people who have that a little bit of that baggage you were mentioning, how we can let go of that and be open to looking at all of these symbols with a beginner's eye.
Yeah, outgrowing the limited conventional concept, of course, is going beyond the historical significance and also beyond the material focus on this time. Many people who celebrate Christmas spend Advent, which is supposed to be the time of spiritual preparation, which I'll talk about in a moment, what we do to spiritually prepare, but it's supposed to be that time to spiritually prepare. And so many people, spend that time shopping and, planning parties and, making it a secular celebration. So Yogananda said it's fine, to have the social and the family gathering that, celebrates this time, but it also, you need to recognize that this is a spiritual experience that Advent and Christmas points to. And so get yourself ready for that. So in the Path of Wonder, I have outlined several practices that we can have, during this time. Contemplating the symbols is a very rich way to enter the deeper significance of this time. So, if you have a nativity or if you're looking at pictures and Christmas cards of the nativity scene, is instead of looking at it as just, characters in a play or part of the historical drama or part of church dogma, you can explore those pieces as aspects of yourself and of the story of the birth of the Christ consciousness in Jesus, as the story of the birth in Christ consciousness within you. So, for example, in the story, that most are familiar with, we have the teaching that, this Christ consciousness could not, that in Jesus could not be, there was no room for them at the inn. They couldn't find shelter in the inn. So when we look at it metaphysically, the inn is understood as the restless mind. So there's no place in the restless mind for the birth of the awareness of the omnipresence of the Christ. So this is why, Yogananda wanted this all-day meditation so that we can get out of the inn, which has no room, which is noisy and full, and enter into the stable, in a sense, into the body mind complex, where we can make it quiet and approach then this doorway to the Christ consciousness. So we're going to be holding that all-day meditation at the center, and this time it will be global, and it will be online on December 23rd. So anyone can join in. If you go to csecenter.org, you can find out about it, but it'll be going on throughout the day.
Absolutely. That's going to be just such a wonderful support for this time. So in your book, you write about how Advent is imbued with a sense of faithful waiting. And certainly, the weeks leading up to the birth is in, Advent historically a time of waiting. So what are some themes in the Christmas story about waiting? And how can we look at them from this deeper perspective, from this yoga perspective?
There are a lot of pieces in the story about the great mystery. Things are happening. Mary is given the announcement that her life is going to change. Things are not, as she had planned, that she's going to give birth to a son who will be called the Son of God, and who will be, his name will mean God, with us. And, there's these announcements that come, to the shepherds, to the kings, to Mary, to Joseph, and they're shrouded in mystery. Like, how can this be? And the angel Gabriel, of course, says, well, with God, all things are possible. And so, there's a time of just surrendering into the mystery of not knowing how it is that the will of God, the grace of God, is going to unfold in their lives. And this is true in our life, and it's particularly true right now. It's mysterious to us, like in these times, in these conditions, how is it that the grace of God will prevail and will reveal itself in our lives? And so, each of them is on this journey of surrendered devotion, of contemplation, of waiting for the revelation of how it is that this grace of God will be made manifest. And so for us as yogis, it points to this idea of the journey of Advent, the journey of sadhana or spiritual practice, is always this combination of inspired action on our part and openness to divine grace, because the ultimate revelation, spiritual revelation, the experience of Kutastha Chaitanya, comes through grace, but we turn ourselves towards that opening. We meditate at the spiritual eye, awaiting the shining of the Christ light.
No, it's just really, really beautiful. So we've got about another minute and a half before we go to the break. Is there another, another aspect that you wanted to tuck in there? I know in the next section, we're really going to talk about the nativity and dive into all those symbols, which I'm really looking forward to. Is there anything else you want to add in our little bit of our little sliver here?
I think I would just say that, yoga in Yogananda's writings, he talks about the different levels of approaching scripture, historical, psychological, so we look at the historical significance, what actually happened. We look at psychological level, which gives us ethics and some insight into nature of the mind. And then there is the metaphysical and intuitional approach to scripture, which he took. And he said, you can't really understand what Jesus taught until you know how to enter into the consciousness that he was teaching from.
Wow. That's great. And with that, we'll come to the break. You're listening to the Yoga Hour. My guest today is author, poet, and spiritual teacher Yogacharya O'Brian, and we've been discussing her new ebook, Path of Wonder, A Meditator's Guide to Advent. Yogacharya offers many online classes and programs and has authored several books, which you can learn more about at her website, ellengraceo'brien.com, and also find out the programs from the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment at their website, csecenter.org. We welcome your comments and questions. You can contact us at yogahour@unity.fm. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo, producer and host of the show. When we come back from the break, we'll explore the rich symbolism of Advent and how it can help us to deepen our meditation practice. We'll be right back. Welcome back from the break. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo, and I'm here today with Yoga Hour founder and spiritual director, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brian, discussing the deeper meaning of Advent from a meditator's perspective. You can get a copy of her new ebook, Path of Wonder, A Meditator's Guide to Advent, from her website, ellengraceo'brien.com. So, Yogacharya O'Brian, you write, one of the great promises of the advent of Christ consciousness is healing. One of the great promises of the advent of Christ consciousness is healing. The ego limits, divides, and turns away from imperfection, but the Christ consciousness reveals wholeness and brings healing amid brokenness. What was once considered impossible becomes possible with God. During the days of Advent, cultivate a greater receptivity to healing. So I wanted to talk about healing. And you wrote a lovely story about the lamb that came in your new nativity scene. And I thought it would be fun to share that with listeners.
Oh, yeah. So I wrote in the new book, The Path of Wonder, about an experience I had with ordering a new nativity set, which of course has, Mary and Jesus, the baby Jesus, and Joseph, the wise men, the shepherds, and then all the animals that are there in the nativity scene. And as I was unpacking that box and just, marveling at the beautiful carving, they're made of olive wood, I think. And the last little piece that I took out was this precious little standing lamb, this tiny little lamb, but its back leg had broken in transit. And I remember, just feeling kind of the disappointment, here's the perfect set, right? And now it's broken. And so, the first thought is, well, I could send it back and get another one. But I felt that sort of call to know it could be mended. And for me, that call towards mending or healing is just inherent in the season, in the Advent season as we prepare, for this awareness of God fully in our lives. And I remember then a story of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, who he was the temple priest at Dakshineshwar. And evidently, one of the pandits, one of the priests who was there, was moving a statue, a murti of Lord Krishna, and dropped it and broke it. And according to teachings, it is considered inauspicious to worship a damaged image of the Lord. And so the priests, other priests got together and they thought, well, we should, get rid of this statue of Krishna and, put it off in the Ganges to go back to nature and get another one. And Ramakrishna said, which was against tradition, he said, if you had a child with a broken leg, you wouldn't replace the child. And so then the story goes that he mended the statue himself, and that it stayed in the temple. So he demonstrated this importance of the ability to heal and to transform, which of course is the message of Advent for us, this ability to heal and to transform. And I want to say something about that healing and transformation, that really the spiritual experience of healing is and maybe and likely is different than what we expect on a material level. Mm-hmm. So, we have what we want, at a mental, physical level. And we sort of cling to that and we ask God, for that. But the healing that comes is very often more expansive than that. It's not limited to that level. Sometimes I feel at the end of the year, which also coincides with this pilgrimage time of Advent, I feel like all of my failures, from this year or even years past, that I feel like sort of follow me around, they kind of move in with me like roommates that I don't like at this time of the year. And I can't get rid of them. They're in my mind, and I think about things that I didn't do that I said I would do, or things that I did that I wish I hadn't done. And so it's like these bad roommates that are there, and I don't know how to get rid of them. Well, the healing that comes, through this lifting of our consciousness to the Christ consciousness, to Kutastha Chaitanya, is an expansion, in a sense that, if we use my metaphor, would make a bigger house, that these bad roommates have a space. So it's not like you get rid of that, but you somehow learn to live in a more expanded consciousness, which brings everything into harmony, everything into peace. And so we have this idea that healing is kind of like resolution. It's tying everything up in a tidy way. But that's not been my experience. In other words, like, we don't get rid of the past, but it becomes transformed in our consciousness. And that is the healing.
Mm. I think this is such a valuable thing to point to, and certainly something that I helped people with all the time in my years as a practicing physician, because people often develop, for example, medical conditions that aren't healable. They are treatable. They can be lived with, and sometimes they can't. I mean, sometimes people are coping with a, metastatic cancer diagnosis or what have you. But the interesting thing to point to is that healing and wholeness is still possible. And that there are other levels besides just the physical level that can be that can mend your heart and touch your soul and open you to these wonderful experiences that, as you said, opening up our ideas of healing, opening up our ideas of healing and not insisting that it look a certain way, can be incredibly helpful in people coming to grips with things that are not the way we want them to be. And certainly there's a lot about this past year that has not been the way we want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've been talking about Advent, and some people may be totally new to what that is. People, of course, are familiar with Christmas, but many have never even heard of this piece of it that is Advent, and Advent means the coming or arrival of the Christ. And so it is in the Christian tradition, it is the 4 weeks, preceding Christmas, where people who take it up as a sadhana, as a holy practice, are engaged in contemplation and ritual and contemplation of their scriptures that have to do with this period of time as preparation of the heart and the mind for this birth of the Christ within us.
Mm-hmm. Your book is really beautiful in that it gives different practices on a weekly basis and on a daily basis for us to do during Advent. And obviously, this is December 17th that we're recording the show, and so people are going to be listening to it over the next, period of time. I'm just wanting to verify it's not too late. It's not too late if you haven't started your Advent practice, even though time has, Advent has been going on for a while. There's still time. Do you agree?
Absolutely. There is definitely still time, and there's time, of course, to take up the contemplation and the meditation, to engage in the meditation that Yogananda inspired, the worldwide all-day meditation, which you can participate any part of it that you like. But also you could think of your practice, if you're just entering into this, in a sense, as planting a seed. So this is a practice that I have been engaged in, for decades. And it has evolved, over time with me, and deepened for me. And, another reason why I wanted to write this book and get this out there is that Christmas can be a time of great stress and disappointment for people, without the spiritual root. And a lot of people do celebrate Christmas as a cultural or family holiday. And, while there are, certainly sweet and loving things that happen around gathering family and with friends, there's also a lot of conflict that goes on. There's a lot of stress, around buying and getting and doing. And so I just, I have said, to yogis, to students who study with me, that trying to have, Christmas without Advent is like trying to have samadhi without meditation. So, you miss out on so much without really seeing it as the holy pilgrimage that it is. And then when you arrive at Christmas after really doing some inner work during Advent, you really can see in a much stronger way this light shining in your family, this light shining in our world. So instead of, like something that you buy, you prepare, you work, and then people come over, they open presents, they eat dinner, and then you're exhausted. It's over. There is this spiritual depth that totally transforms that experience.
Mm. And it strikes me this is a wonderful year to really explore that, since a lot of the outer trappings, a lot of those family gatherings and et cetera will not be happening this year because of the pandemic. And we still have all of this room, all of this spaciousness with our inner work. Mm-hmm. And so it's still not only possible, but perhaps, really, really helpful to be able to move into that space and feel that spaciousness of exploring Christmas on a different level, rather than just feeling sad and bereft of the ways it's not going to be like it was in the past.
Absolutely. Or disappointed of packages that don't arrive on time,
Right.
Things like
that. So now I really want to turn our focus to the nativity scene. And as I've been sharing with you, my mom, who died in 2011, was an avid collector of folk art, and in particular nativity scenes. So when she passed, I ended up with many of them, and I really love having them out during this Christmas season. So there are really, really interesting variations in the nativity scenes that I have. One of them has camels that brought the wise men. Another actually is from an Indian village, and then in that one the wise men came on horses. So there's the 3 horses. That also has a bear and a buffalo, in addition to the more traditional lambs. So I've really been enjoying reflecting on the inner meaning of these nativity scenes. I thought it'd be lovely to discuss that for our listeners. So first of all, you point out that in a nativity scene, they're designed really for all of the figures to face the Christ child, which is symbolic of our own Christ consciousness, as we've been discussing. So why is that important?
There's so much that we can uncover, if we want to use that as a symbol for contemplation. We look at the different elements in the story as reflections of different parts of our own psyche. The animals as our lower drives, the shepherds as our feminine side, our intuition, our devotion, the wise men as our discernment, that higher mind, Mary as surrendered devotion, Joseph as the protector of new life, all parts of us, and even the star and the manger itself. And the manger represents the consciousness, the mind field that is purified in a sense, that can hold the Christ consciousness, that can reflect it. So, each of these components of the story reflect, parts of us. And you mentioned how I talked about most of the sets that I've seen are designed to have these pieces. I was looking at mine and just was very aware of that they're sort of curved in the way that you set it up, and certainly in the classic representations of the scenes that we see in art. Everything is facing the Christ and sort of like drawn magnetically, and that you as an onlooker are drawn magnetically into the center of being. And really, for a yogi, we could understand that as a meditating mind, as a mind on samadhi, meaning that all the parts of us, the lower drives, the awakened intuition, the faculty of discernment, are all meditating, there's a stillness focused upon the inner Christ. So this is the experience of samadhi, and I was talking in my satsang about it this week. I said, we don't see anybody like looking around because they're bored at the nativity scene, and even the animals, are not wandering off. Usually they're sitting. So it's a beautiful depiction really of a meditating mind, or you could think of it as samadhi, which means to bring together completely.
Beautiful. So one of the other elements that you didn't mention is the angels. Several of mine have angels, that are in them. So what's the symbolism of the angels?
Well, angels, you've heard the phrase probably, angels of our inspiration, or our better angels, which are our thoughts. Angels represent the inspired thoughts, the divine thoughts, or the soul promptings that come in the purified mental field. So some of the images of Mary that are really lovely, when I do the workshop that I do for Advent, we have a lot of classic art, and in many of them you see this sort of wispy presence of Gabriel right at her ear, in a sense, like speaking into her ear. And that to me, is a graphic depiction of what it's like to receive higher inspiration, like the word of God being revealed to you in the depths of your contemplation.
So one thing that listeners can do, if they haven't already, is to find a symbol, a representation of the nativity. And as you point out in the book, there's many. So many people may have a nativity scene that they can set up, or maybe it's already set up. But there's also just Christmas cards often will have a depiction of the nativity. Works of art there's lots and lots of depictions of the nativity. And so what would you recommend as people get this image? How can we use it during this time?
Well, in the same way that we contemplate scripture or are simply open, have a mindful awareness of life, we can notice what comes to us, what occurs and what draws us. So even if, a friend sends you a Christmas card and it has an image on it, and if that image, sort of inspires you, you can inquire more deeply, what is it that interests you about that? You can pray with it like you would pray with scripture that you don't quite understand, and see, what is revealed. So I talked about my experience of setting up, unpacking the nativity, the lamb with the broken leg that I felt moved to heal. So a natural progression of that experience would be, what is it in my life that I'm ready to heal? And, so you just take the experience you're having, or what is drawing you, or what comes to you, or what is mysterious to you that you don't get, and then take it into your contemplation. And a good time for that is after meditation.
Lovely. So in addition to getting a copy of your new ebook, Path of Wonder, what other steps would you recommend? We've talked about the nativity scene contemplation. You just mentioned lovely ideas about, exploring things that are mysterious to you. Any other tips for people who may be just beginning this exploration of Advent?
Of course, meditation will point back to that, meditating every day. And then, as Yogananda advised, during this season, meditating a little longer with intentionality and a willingness to experience Christ consciousness and to know it is possible for you. So this is, we started out in the beginning with his quote about, outgrowing the limited the limited awareness of Christ, the limited concept of Christ. And in order to do that, we have to experience it for ourselves. We have to have the direct experience of the Christ consciousness. So meditation is really the principal tool for that. So, entering into sort of a contemplation of the season, mindfulness of your own life, what is occurring in your life at this time, how is God calling you to healing or to a greater awareness, meditating, contemplating. And then, I think asking what is most meaningful, not simply going through the motions of the holidays or the holy days, but what really deeply calls you towards action. And it might be, a gift for a friend, but it would be in a deeper way,
Indeed. So we've come to the last few minutes, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to leave some words of encouragement or inspiration with our listeners.
Thank you for that. Thank you for this opportunity to really delve into the beautiful mystery of the seasons, of the symbols of this season. And I want to say that, the reality of God is around us and within each and every one of us, and is the strength of our strength. It is the light of the world. And as, the saints have taught in our Kriya Yoga tradition, you can experience that and you can know it directly for yourself. And the traditions, whether they're from the East, the symbols, the scriptures, or from the West, the symbols and the scriptures are all pointing to that same reality. And that reality is not outside of us. That reality is the self of ourself, the timeless, the eternal. And so we are called to realize that, to know that, so that we can live in freedom We can live in the joy of self-knowing, even in the most difficult times.
Thank you so much for that. You've been listening to the Yoga Hour. It's been my pleasure to share this time with you. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo, host and producer of the show, and we've been discussing A Meditator's Guide to Advent with the Yoga Hour's founder and spiritual director, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brian. Yogacharya O'Brian is an internationally acclaimed spiritual teacher, author, poet, and the ebook we've been talking about is Path of Wonder, available at her website, ellengraceo'brien.com, where you can also find out about her many other books and online programs. You can also hear many of her online talks on her YouTube channel, Ellen Grace O'Brian. So thank you so much for this conversation, Yogacharya. I've really enjoyed speaking with you and diving into this wonderful symbolism that is a way that we can enrich our yoga and meditation practice.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy to be with you, and I wish all of the listeners to Yoga Hour a season of peace and of healing and of great abundance of love and blessing.
I also wanted to remind people about the 2020 Worldwide Meditation for the Holy Days with Yogacharya O'Brian and Kriya Yoga ministers from around the world, which is going to be on Wednesday, December 23rd, 2020 from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., although people are invited and encouraged to attend whatever portion that they can. You can find out more about the Meditation for the Holy Days at csecenter.org. Also, there are many, many online programs offered by Yogacharya O'Brian and the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, including morning meditation, which occurs daily from 6:30 to 7:30 a.m. Pacific. Also, weekday afternoon meditation from 4 to 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and Sunday morning programs, satsangs, with Yogacharya O'Brian and other CSE ministers from 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific. Join us next time when I will be joined by Beth Spindler, a practicing yoga therapist, yoga teacher, and author. We will be discussing courageous living, yoga's tools for releasing anxiety and fear. The Yoga Hour is a service project of the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment. Again, you can find out more about CSE from their website, csecenter.org. Thank you to the Yoga Hour team. And I look forward to being with you again. Until then, remember, you carry your own healing and wholeness within you. Share your peace and joy with all you meet. Bye now.